Wolfman Jack opening on you. This is the Sweat Equity Podcast. I am your host, Law Smith. Sitting here with me is the Lion's Purr. That is Caleb Fuddy.
Hey, buddies.
Yeah, we're doing this on a Monday morning. Most people take the day off. We're doing this Memorial Day because we want to make sure we get an episode out every Tuesday morning. Our first reoccurring guest, but very, very welcome in the home of the podcast studio, power attorney to the stars, Mr. Stephen Fantetti of Fantetti Legal.
Good morning.
Confetti Fantetti. I've lost my fastball in the morning. I got to get this coffee going.
I was actually glad you didn't say confetti.
Well,
until he said it.
Until I did a retroactive nickname. If
you were glad for 1 minute and 20 seconds.
If you watch this online, I'll have the stunner shades on, the Sam Rothstein casino style. Yeah, that's a nice pull.
Right?
Not too bad. Yeah. So we're gonna try to have this as a video if people want to have it on in the background while they're doing something more important. But we got to test this video thing out. And Caleb and I were talking about this. What if we do the Sweat Equity Podcast as a live panel at some point?
That's right.
Where we promote it like an event, like we're actually gonna, like we would if I was doing a stand-up show, but we'll have you. As an attorney that knows business law, and then maybe someone else that's an expert in their field, and people can ask questions live.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's something where we're getting really good feedback so far on the episodes, the guests we've been having, and even some of the episodes where it's just been Law and I going back and forth. But I think one of the main components of it is we don't do this. It's not like we do this podcast and then we just go listen to it in our car over and over because we want to hear what we have to say.
Quite the contrary. I don't listen at all.
I've only listened so I can, make sure I get better at this.
Well, yeah, you got to get some reps in.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get better and better. But we do this so we can bring information to other people who are interested in business, who are interested in entrepreneurship, who maybe want to take that leap, take that jump away from the 9-to-5 and do it on their own. So I think having an open panel discussion, maybe on Facebook Live, or utilizing some other sort of interactive live stream will give us that opportunity to fulfill that directly rather than in a retrospective platform such as this.
Yeah, and you got to try to catch that wave. Facebook Live was the trigger word in there. We think like that is a thing that's not utilized correctly yet.
Yeah, some people are, but not. I don't. The majority does not. Yeah.
Hey, but we try. I mean, we want to try stuff with this podcast, and just like any business, you want to try to keep growing out and see if something works. And this will dovetail nicely into. We've been working with Fantetti Legal for a while. We tried to do a legal podcast, and we just figured out, hey, we did it for 3 months, and we go, hey, I don't think this is the right time right now. Yeah. But I'm glad we did it, though. I learned a lot just being the dummy between DC and Mr. Fantetti here, just kind of gaining a lot of knowledge about how the legal system actually works in a lot of ways. I use the finders, minders, and grinders theory a lot. Talking about that last night with my family because we party. And yeah. And then for those that don't know what that is, it's kind of a consulting / law firm theory where you have, if you want to, do you want to take it?
No, keep going.
Yeah. You're like, I'll let you drift out into the sea and try to explain this.
Well, it's I think it was at 3 minutes and 5 seconds. The glasses already came off.
Yeah, I couldn't handle it. It's too much.
It's not for everyone. Bright lights do hurt people.
I'll fall asleep. Yeah. Well, man, look, man, I ain't no rapper, all right?
You're no Maybach Diamonds.
I'm no Maybach Diamonds.
At Maybach Diamonds.
Episode 28. If you're willing to go backwards and see Caleb pop a blood vessel.
I did.
Yeah.
I laughed so hard, my eyes started bleeding.
So finders are your business development people. You're going out, you're sourcing up business. Minders are the people that are the nerds that are in the office, that are in their lane. They only do one thing. Law firms try to keep them there so they don't have the ability to move a lot of times. This happens a lot in any business that's a large corporation. And then you have the grinders, who are the guys that come in court and then kind of close deals, lay the dick on the table kind of deal. Yeah.
Coffees for closers.
Yeah, exactly. And so those kind of things I learned, those tropes, I kind of learned that it seemed very, this seems very normal, like, yeah, so what? But it's a good way to compartmentalize. And so we tried that with Fantetti Legal as a way to do lean content marketing, where we had, hey, if we spend an hour doing a podcast, a little bit before, setting it up, a little bit after, and then get it out there, organically, this podcast has become a long-term marketing strategy.
Yeah.
But it wasn't meant to. It was just meant to kind of, you and I have a general interest in people's businesses.
Yeah.
And so we have a general interest in talking shit to each other via podcast, but we're just like, I don't think all three of us are here yet. To be able
it
to
wasn't as
do
professional perhaps as we wanted it to be.
Yeah, right.
It's more like we don't see each other very often, so let's kick it, and we realize, some of this stuff shouldn't go live.
Yeah,
well, it's tough, and you started your firm, and you wanted to. We didn't really set you up correctly. If you don't know who Steve Fantetti is, a business attorney, does a lot of corporate business law, real estate law in there as well.
A little drone regulations as well.
Yeah,
do that.
Yeah.
And employment law. Well done.
That's right.
So why? All right, let's do this. Why should Why should we regulate? Why should we get a certification for our drones?
Well, number one, because you have to. But the more important thing here, I'll just be specific.
I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
And I've got a drone.
Of course.
Or a videographer, and I've got a drone.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, you should get this certified. Why should I listen to this, though?
That's a very good question. So the FAA has what's called a 333 exemption, where if you want to fly, and I'll just keep it into the business realm, if you are a business and you want to use a drone for any reason, whether it's you want to take aerial photography and one of the big reasons it's used in Florida is for real estate. And if you want to go out on the water for cruise ships or for yachts, and people try to take aerial photographs of yachts because it's a big selling point. People want to see that in the open ocean or even downtown by skyscrapers and things like that. It gives people really good views. Well, you can't just do it because the areas are zoned where you have to get the rights to be able to fly your drone in certain areas of airspace. So if you have the 333 exemption, it allows you to fly your drone without any legal issues that could arise as long as you have the exemption. If someone tries to stop you, they're automatically going to lose any claim against you to stop flying your drone because you show them the 333 exemption. So number one, if you want to do it for a business purpose, that's what that exemption there is for. If you are an individual, you still have to file, but you don't have to file it as strictly as it would require for a business. You don't have to meet the same type of regulations. You're not going to be able to fly in certain types of airspaces. So that's kind of the way it differs. But again, even if you want to fly somewhere downtown, let's say you want to go to Curtis Hickson Park, you still got to go to Hillsborough County and get cleared through the commissioners. But even to just be able to fly and have a license, you got to go through the FAA.
So will that hold up? Is that I should ask this, is that well known as far as like someone who would try to stop you from filming, maybe a police officer, maybe some sort of security guard, anything like that? Is that, like, let's say you're downtown, you're at Curtis Hickson, and you're flying a drone, and a cop comes up and he's like, hey, do you have your what was the 33?
333.
333, yeah. Hey, do you have your 333? Is that what they're going to ask you? Or if you show them the form, he'll leave you alone? Is it that well known, or is it just keep flying, but I'm going to cite you, and then when you go to pay the fine, you show them that? Like, how does that process kind of work?
Generally the legal...
Because I should ask this. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Is it more like a license to fly it? You just kind of flash the badge and they're like, oh, you're good. You've got clearance?
It's an exemption from having to recertify. Okay. So generally, if people want to go fly somewhere, they have to go and get the rights to obviously do it every single time.
Right.
Or rather than having to do it every single visit, the exemption exempts you from having to file every single time. So if I want to go to St. Pete one time, Clearwater one time, wherever else, a different time, you're going to have to do it every single time. Well, this gives you the exemption from having to do it, and it's good for a year until you have to renew it again. And to answer your other question, the legal aspects of it, they will know. Police officers, whoever, they're going to ask you. And now, are they going to say the actual statute and name it? No, they'll probably just say, do you have your papers?
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or
some general statement that they don't even know what they're asking for.
Yeah, but they'll know that it has to do with the FAA. They will know that. And they'll probably have to ask you, if it's current. And they're going to see if you have your paperwork on you, which you should always have. Yeah. And then you just kind of go from there.
And I've taken the stance. I know you mentioned kind of like there's regulations where people can fly. And it's mind-blowing to me how many times we've heard on the news, especially as of late here where we are in Tampa, of people flying drones near the airport, or people flying drones like in these places they're not supposed to. And we have an Air Force base here as well. I'm sure there's countless stories you could hear from people on base of drones coming over there. But it's kind of like my like rule of thumb is if you can't drive a car there, don't. In terms of like regulation, like obviously you can't drive a car on the water. I get that. It's not that early in the morning.
Yeah.
But if you can't, you're not going to drive a car on the runway at the airport. So why are you going to fly your drone there? You know what I mean? It's obviously obviously a prohibited airspace.
It's a common sense thing. Some people just don't have it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Florida especially.
Yeah, maybe that's true too. But there's obvious areas where given the TSA and the high security levels they have around an airport, they shut down the ability to fly anything there within miles. I mean, there's no chance of you even be able to fly a drone anywhere near. You probably International Mall might be even that could be pushing it if you're flying a drone out there. So unless you got special clearance, I mean, good luck. Because again, it's not just the fact that you're around there. You can't interfere with the other planes that are trying to land. Objects could get in the way of anything. You don't know when, and planes are constantly coming through. I mean, to me, it's just common sense. Same thing with an Air Force base.
Yeah.
But security is the ultimate reason.
Well, I think with an Air Force base too, like you're gonna lose your drone. Like I found a drone once and I like looked it up and it was worth like $4,500. I mean, that's not a small amount of money for someone to have a toy or even a tool at work. Yeah. $4,500 piece of equipment you use at work. That's pretty expensive. You're gonna lose that if you fly it over an Air Force base. They're not gonna help it land safely. They're gonna blow that out of the sky.
Yeah, a lot of them are,
and they're gonna love it too.
Oh, they'll love it.
That's gonna be the highlight of their day over there.
Yeah. Well, and I think they're doing like attack hawks and stuff now at airports. So some of these things that they're trying to get ahead of this a little bit, surprisingly, but it's one of those things where I think they have like hawks and like attack birds.
The animals.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
They look just like real animals are flying in the sky, but they're actually drones. But like those are military grade.
No, but I'm saying no. They're actually training hawks and falcons and shit to like go out there. You can be a falconer.
Serious?
The falconer market is
like Game of Thrones. They send a raven to send letters to people and stuff like that.
Is Tampa becoming like Nepal?
Well, no, I mean like that's what are you gonna do? Like you have to have something that regulates this. It's probably easier to find these weird bird people than it is to like.
They're looking for stuff to do.
What are you gonna do? Make your own drones for the airport to protect this?
But how's that gonna happen? These things got propellers on them. I mean, it's gonna tear up.
You haven't seen any videos where the birds take them out?
I've never.
Awesome.
I have to see this.
It's so awesome.
Maybe we'll have to post that.
PETA could be mad if the birds get hurt. No birds were hurt during this.
PETA's gonna be mad at everything.
A murder of crows. Yes. That's what you need. Yeah. Yeah. Well, look. So back to like kind of the original. If I'm a photographer, videographer, I have an LLC. That's the first part of that answer you're saying. Like, I need to get that 333 exemption.
Yeah.
If I'm a individual that has a drone that's using it, I should still get this.
You still need the exemption, correct?
You still need the exemption.
There's going to be like less restrictions. You can't fly in certain areas. It's more like for your backyard, stuff like that.
So if you're a videographer, photographer that has a LLC, let's say you have your shit together and you kind of like, you actually have a real business. You're not just kind of doing this as a self-employed kind of thing on the side, or you're trying to find yourself while you're doing this and you're doing all this stuff. I mean, Caleb works with these guys all the time. So it's one of those things where your business could be fined. I think it's like 10 grand or something like that.
Yeah, but that's not even the biggest issue. The biggest issue is if something happens in the event that you're using it, there's liability. That's the biggest problem. Then your company can be sued. And if you don't have your company set up properly, they can pierce through your company. They can go after your individual assets. And that's the thing people don't realize is everything dominoes if you don't do everything right. Obviously, if you have the exemption, you want to have proper insurance. You don't have proper insurance and something happens. I mean, there's been stories where people have been hit in the face with a drone, or someone's personal property's been damaged where a drone lands and it goes through a window, or someone's expensive Ferrari or whatever it is. The point is that's now liability that goes back to your business. So you have to have a lot more things in check than just filing the exemption. You got to, like I said, you got to have insurance. You got to make sure your company has, proper corporate documents and has been keeping up with its formalities. Because if it's not, then your company protection's gone, which is the whole reason why you created companies, to avoid that. Obviously, personal liability. So there's a lot more to this than just filing one piece of paper. So
right. Where can people go to fill this out? Let's say someone actually does want to do this.
Want to do the exemption? They could go to www.fantettilegal.com.
Okay,
and
bam.
we could do it there. Obviously, you can go online to the FAA's website and do it out of obviously you have to pay the proper fees. You got to understand what you're doing and fill out the paperwork properly. But obviously, Fantetti Legal can do that if it needed to assist clients in that matter. But again, it's all online. It's all available as everything else is today.
Well, so the big question I get, we deal with a lot of startups. You do as well.
I do.
Fantetti Legal does a lot of startup businesses, or let's say startup to not very mature businesses, in the sense that 3 years or younger is kind of where I kind of consider that.
Yeah.
If you're over 3 years, you're kind of a mature business. I get this question a lot, and I don't, just by being around you a lot, I feel like I can answer it okay, but I always kind of defer to you if it's someone in Florida. If it's somewhere elsewhere, I'm like, well, here's what I think, but you should really talk to an attorney. We have a lot of startups that go, well, what do I do? Do I do an LLC,
right,
or do I incorporate? And what's the difference? And you've helped me go through this, even though I thought I knew what I was doing.
Right.
Where I went on Biz Filings or
Sunbiz.
LegalZoom, and I just did it on my own.
Yeah.
Well, Sunbiz is the state regulated one, which
You got to go there first.
in Florida. Well, so
you can't register without going through there first.
Well, LegalZoom and Biz Filings, to my understanding, is they kind of they add a little bit of a vig to it. So let's say it's $150 to do an LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Theirs will be $185, and they'll make it a cleaner experience for you to do it. All they're doing is kind of turbo taxing it in a way. They make it a better user UX UI experience.
Yep.
The user experience is UX for non-nerds. UI is user interface. So they make a better UI UX than Sunbiz, and they charge you for it. Now, this isn't the best way to go because every business has a lot of variables.
Yes.
And so it's recommended to go through an attorney, but people, I think, here's the big thing. A lot of people put this cash. I get this with people who need a website or branding or an advertising campaign. They put this imaginary number in their head that's way too large sometimes. They go, I don't know. Getting an LLC, that's like $10,000. And you're like,
well, it could
no.
be.
Well, it can if you're a big business.
$125.
It's literally pretty inexpensive, but I think you create this snowball. It's like, oh, I'm going to get a house contractor, and we're going to get a deck built. This is what I want to do. But who knows? That's like $100,000. I don't know. Like, you have no idea in your head, so you just make it the highest amount possible.
And I've fallen victim to that before as well, but I think what I found out was it can be expensive when you're talking about the entire package, when you're not just to get your business started, but people think of what they need to go from sitting on their couch to go from doing business and being legally covered. They've got to go with the whole 9 yards. They've got to do, filing on in Florida, it would be Sunbiz, LegalZoom, what have you, with the LLCs, with the fictitious names, those sort of things. But then you need the domain name, then you need the website, then you need trademarking, then you need copyright stuff. So, which we'll get into, and I have questions about later. Mm-hmm. So I think when people think of it, they think of everything they need. That will be a lot higher of a price than just the LLC.
Yep.
But to start with an LLC, or to start with just your filing and filing your corporation with the state and being licensed, I think, people just need to dive into it, and they need to know where to dive into it as well. We mentioned on this show before.
And that's one of the things we wanted to bring out.
It's not as scary as it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why Fantetti can get in the, if you've seen Old School and you see Will Ferrell in the debate club, Fantetti can get in this zone where he's like, he's explaining everything, and you're like, how do you just have this Wikipedia just reeling it off? And it's not broken English like I talk. It's like it's almost like
polished.
Yeah, it's like it's verbatim what you're supposed to say. So, what's the difference between an LLC and a corporation? And go.
All right. Well, an LLC is a limited liability company, and basically it was created for the main purpose of having the liability of the individuals separate from the actual company entity itself. So before LLCs, and I'll keep it really brief so I don't put people to sleep, but the only type of entity you could really be was a sole proprietor, means you conducted business on your own with no other employees, or you could be a partnership. And a partnership, depending on what type of partnership you are, but to keep it simple on the general terms, if you're a partnership, all the partners of the business shared liability equally. So if something happened, you were all liable for it.
So
Even though you
Caleb
had
and
a
I are
business,
partners.
If you were a partnership, whatever happened.
Caleb does PCP again. And
Again.
and yeah. Look at him. The guy is hyper all the time.
And
I'm trying to heal this. I'm trying to heal this blood vessel here.
He gets sued, but we're a partnership.
Yes.
My assets, my house could be
everything
part of that.
Now,
sorry about that.
Of course, because
get off the angel dust.
Now there's exceptions. You guys could have indemnification provisions where, of course, maybe one partner, if they exceed or are grossly negligent, could obviously indemnify the other partners who weren't, etc. But generally, but and this is for a general partnership. There's other partnerships called limited liability, limited partnerships, where the liability can be separate. But again, that's way more off topic than what we're getting at. So, but before those were even created, they wanted to say, look, where can we find an entity that has, the benefits of separate liability completely, where there's no, dicing it up. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, like partnerships. They created the LLCs, and with the LLCs, there's also tax benefits, which I can talk about briefly as well. So, but to cut a long story short, the LLC gives members, that's what they're called, interests, ownership percentage in the company, and their ownership percentage is tied to their profits, distributions, and sometimes even their voting, if you want to do it that way. But the biggest protection you have is no matter what you do in your business, the business will be liable, not the individuals, obviously, as long as you maintain your corporate formalities, which is having a corporate book that has, an operating agreement, you've kept proper minutes, you've taken minutes, you've passed proper resolutions, you've made your annual fee filings. I mean, everything that you have to do as a business, you can't miss. If you don't do those formalities, you lose the protection that the Florida statutes give you as a business. And what happens is called piercing the corporate veil, where if a company wants to go after you personally to satisfy a judgment, let's say it's $1 million, but you only have $500,000 worth of equity in your business. If you don't have the proper formalities of a business, when they ask you for your corporate book and you have nothing, the courts will allow a business to go get all the assets of your company and then go through your company, as they say, pierce through, and go to the individuals who own it and get their personal net worth to satisfy the judgment. So that's why, people think because they create a company, everything's fine. Companies are created for solely the purpose of separating your liability from you personally and keeping it separate for your business. And so if you don't maintain the formalities and you don't keep those up, then you can lose that protection. Now, for a corporation, it's the same. You still get that protection. The problem is the ownership's different.
Mm-hmm.
So with members, it's more inclusive in an LLC. For a corporation, you offer stock. And so the stock owners are the ones that own the company. But there's also a separate body called board of directors that actually run the company.
Mm-hmm.
They're separate from the shareholders. And when you have a corporation, you have the opportunity, and you can do this as an LLC, but when you go public, they call it, where you actually want to become a publicly traded company on an exchange, New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, whatever, you now offer stocks to the world to buy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so anybody can own your company. And it's the same thing if you have a corporation in a way that's not publicly traded. If it's getting large enough and you offer a certain amount of shares, if one of the owners wants to sell or divest of their shares, obviously, if there's right of first refusal rights and the company can buy them back through redemptions or whatever. Otherwise, people can sell them out to third parties and random people can start owning your business.
Yeah.
So those are the main differences. It's, do you want to have a little bit more control sometimes as an LLC and that liability's there, or obviously as a corporation, there's a lot of a greater chance that other people can own stock in your company, own it. And then sometimes, depending on what your voting is, sometimes you might not get things passed the way you want, or a board of directors might rule a certain way than what the owners might want. It depends. So those are kind of the main differences. And otherwise, you can be taxed differently too. As an LLC and a corporation, there's also benefits.
Can people who are not in a corporation, they are in just an LLC, they are just a sole business owner, sole proprietor, can they create stock?
Do you mean as a corporation?
No.
Sorry,
just as an LLC, as just a small business owner, can you create stock opportunities for like first round investing, those sort of things?
There's no stock in LLC.
But can you create those? Like, I guess you would chop it up to being equity.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're called membership interest units.
Okay.
Okay. I know it sounds like it's some semantics, but technically, I guess if you want to call them shares.
Well, but that's the reason why we have Steve on
to
call things the right things instead of Law and I going through and just fumbling through it.
Well, fuck, it's English language, but it's like it might as well not be. I mean, that's a lot of it. It's the Jim Gaffigan joke. I'll pay you $500. Just read this an hour. Just read it. Read all of this stuff for me. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I talk to a lot of startups and they go, oh, I'm going to incorporate. And you're like, well, I don't know if you want to do that if you're just doing the LLC just to really get the benefits of there's two ways. I mean, you're not getting, you're not vulnerable to being sued as hard. The company is.
Right.
Well, this is you can't say this. So,
no, go ahead.
Because you have Florida bar rules on like how you can give advice and stuff. So I'm going to try to fill in.
I can't give guarantees either.
Right. And I'm going to talk not in a Dr. Oz hyperbolic way, but I'm going to say this to kind of what I would say to someone if I was having a beer at a happy hour and they're asking me about this. Because I get this question way more than I ever thought I would.
Right.
And I guess because I'm hanging around you and I've been through it the incorrect way, that I feel like at least I can tell them, hey, you should do an LLC, and here's why. Do the LLC because you won't be vulnerable to getting sued. You'll also get tax benefits if you do it correctly.
Right.
And then at the same time, if you're getting started and you got to get started quick, you need that LLC so you can go get an EIN number so you can go get a bank account. So that's a big thing. People still have their funds for their company in a personal account, which is a big no-no.
You cannot commingle funds. That's
yes.
Yeah,
and then your accountant's going to hate you.
Yeah, and that's one of the major ways, like we were talking about with corporate formalities. Like it's not obviously keeping corporate documents, minutes, having an operating agreement for an LLC, all these things, paying your annual fees. But there's more to it. You can't first of all, you can't commingle funds. You have to have a separate bank account for your business and your personal. You can't use your business account every single time for personal expenses, and you have to make sure you itemize what a business expense is and keep track of that. Sometimes a lot of businesses will create multiple LLCs and they'll use one just for personal expenses, and they'll say it's to help run a business, but yet if you can tie it back, then you're not doing it properly. So, there is liability with that too.
Yeah.
Are there this maybe just cross paths a little bit, but are there things that if we got necessarily like a business accountant in here and talk to you and kind of had them on at the same time, I wonder what things would kind of you guys would butt heads about in terms of
I know what it'd probably be.
What would be good for can you explain some of those maybe? Because that seems pretty interesting.
We have the same business accountant, so I know exactly where this would go, but go ahead.
Well, you can maybe
we'll give a shout out to Michael Messina. What's up?
Yeah.
CPA to the stars.
Good guy.
The great Michael Messina.
Just had lunch with him this week. He's gave me a lot of good advice, and definitely someone to talk to around this area especially.
So while you get a hit of your coffee, I'll explain that. Like, I thought an S corp was its own entity. I thought that was the thing. That's a tax. It sounds to the people that don't know any of this stuff, an S corp sounds like it's its own deal. Like you go, okay, I can be a corporation, I can be incorporated, I can be a co, or I can be an S corp. That's not how it is. An S corp's a tax filing.
Okay.
The reason you want to be an S corp when you're an LLC is so you don't get taxed on double distribution. So basically, a distribution of how you're going to pay yourself.
Yeah.
Generally.
So you're not getting.
So you don't. So
I'll just clean up real fast. Basically, and he's right. And basically, what you're saying is, look, like it's not an entity type, because when you're a corporation, you have to have certain types of monikers after your name, like Inc. or Co. etc.
Yeah.
Well, there isn't one that says Toco Works S corp. That's why I'm saying it's not an entity type.
Yeah.
But you're declaring that you're being taxed as a corporation. It's allowing you. You file Form 2553. It's from subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code, and essentially
for those of you keeping score at home.
Yeah, and so essentially what you're doing is you're saying, look, I'm an LLC. I'm not a corporation, but I want to be taxed like one.
Right.
And what you're doing is you're getting the benefit of avoiding double taxation, which means as profits come into a company, they're taxed at the corporate level at the corporate rate. And then as soon as those profits are taxed, the profits keep going, and they have to go to the members of the LLC because they're going to take their own distributions or payments, right? So what the S corp election allows you to do as a business is say, look, we're going to avoid having to be paid or having to pay taxes twice. So if we're taxed at the corporate level, then we're not taxed at the corporate level, then we'll be paying on our distributions. But actually it works vice versa. You're going to be paid first at the corporate level, then the distributions go through, and you're paid at once, and you're all set. Rather than paying twice. So for instance.
But paying twice is definitely higher.
Of course.
Is getting taxed at the corporate level higher than paying out at the end of your distributions?
Well,
is it the same?
No, the corporate rate. First of all, this depends, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
If you are an individual, you're going to be taxed at your individual corporate rate, whatever your individual rate is.
Right.
So it's going to be based on your net worth, your income, all that kind of stuff, whatever you have. So that's basic 1040. You're going to put your distributions on there and get taxed. But if you're a company the general corporate rate's around 32 to 36%. So if you're paying 40% tax rate, it could be more. It just depends.
Yeah.
But you don't have to pay both. So you avoid the double taxation when you're an S corp. Now, if you are if you choose not to be and you want to be taxed twice, you can. It's called a C corp. And with a C corp, it's just it's like the default. If you create a corporation, you're going to be taxed that way. You're going to be taxed on distributions, and you're going to be taxed at the corporate level when your profits come into the business. But the kicker, the benefit is you can avoid certain employment tax rates, certain taxes on benefits for your company, etc. Medical benefits can not be taxed, and so sometimes people say, you know what, even though S corp looks good, we actually want to get the benefits of these other things, so they stay a C corp. So there's lots of different options.
Interesting, yeah.
But an LLC gets that benefit of avoiding double taxation. Is the point we're trying to get.
Yeah, and that's why this stuff becomes confusing. We couldn't even. It's hard to simplify this answer because there's so many variables for every company. Exactly. So that's why it's good to get an attorney like Fantetti of FantettiLegal.com, your business refined. But I mean, like that, this stuff's so hard to navigate, especially when you talk to startups, you talk to younger businesses that they have the idea, they have the inertia, I got to keep moving forward. But if you never really look at this stuff, you could really screw yourself. Yeah. And so I always tell everybody, do you have a good accountant? Okay, well, you need one. Yes. And do you have a good attorney? Okay, well, you need one. Those are my first two things when I'm talking to startups and we're doing planning. It's like, you need these two, and then probably business insurance, I'd say, is another thing. Yeah. None of these things are sexy. As someone who wants to do a startup, you're like, yeah, it's going to be badass. I'm going to have a huge brand. Shit's going to go down. I feel good. And we're going
to get shirts made.
We're going to get shirts and cowboy hats.
People are gonna know me,
right? And I'm gonna be Rick Ross Boston everywhere. But you got to step back and go, all right, what? This is how I think about it. What would a smart business person do if they were starting a company? What is the boring minutia stuff that you need to do? And all this stuff really matters. And we were talking about this. We were laughing about this. I got a really bad NDA, so let's talk NDA. Sure. Because. So for those that don't know, non-disclosure agreement, I signed a few of them depending on who I'm meeting with a client. Right. If we're video recording, I try to get consent.
You will. You mean?
Well, they have no. I mean,
I haven't been asked to sign one thing.
Well, this.
Should I protect
you
myself?
can sue this if you want. You'd have to fight.
What
Steve.
are your damages?
Yeah.
Steve's like typing very quickly over there. He's like, I got to draw this up real quick.
I know.
But I'm saying no, as long as you say I consent to this video, and I don't want it to get out. It doesn't behoove me to have anything public anyway. But I'm saying NDAs, what are they good for? Like,
sure.
I think people, it's just like they know they need to get these corporate documents and these corporate, get their LLC or get a corporation. Yeah. Just like that thought of like, I know I need to do this. A lot of people when they're starting out, they need NDAs, and what is that going to really protect?
Sure. An NDA, first of all, stands for non-disclosure agreement. And essentially what an NDA will do is they're used heavily in the business world, where if you are going to if you're not even sure yet if you're going to even be doing business with somebody, but even if you're going to be having preliminary talks or preliminary negotiations, anything like that, you want to have someone sign NDA if you have certain types of intellectual property, ideas, etc., that you want to protect, that you don't want someone else going off and trying to profit from because they've gotten the idea from you. So what you lock up in the NDA is you protect the rights that you have to any type of intellectual property or ideas you have, and now no one can go out after your meeting or your discussion, conversation, whatever it may be, and go out and all of a sudden start trying to create that same idea and compete against you. And it also protects, has confidentiality provisions in it, which means, look, after we talk, you can't go and share this information with a competitor or someone else who's maybe engaged in the same line of business, and they can utilize what they've learned to now know my secrets and work against me. And so that protects, all those interests. And it's very important to not just grab a random NDA off the internet, which I've seen people do, because they're not going to be tailored to your situation. So, I mean, a lot of NDAs, the terms are very general and broad, and they try to cover a lot. And there's good and bad to that. The good is, you are covering your basis across the spectrum of what can be protected. However, the bad thing is sometimes if they're too overbroad, they might not be enforceable if someone tries to go to court with them. So you have to specifically narrowly tailor a lot of these things, because you can be taking away someone's right to even speak or breathe if they're so overbroad. So the good thing is you have to tailor them to the situation. You have to it's usually good to have an attorney look at them and say, look, here's your business. Teach me about it. Let's learn about it. Now that I know it, here's what you have to really look out for in terms of legal landmines or in terms of information that you need to be protected and how it should be worded. Because a lot of times just grabbing a random one, it's not going to be tailored to that situation. Because I've seen many of them where a lot of clients will come to me and say, look, can you beef this up for me? And I'll say, well, have you been using this? And then they'll say yes. I'm like, well, you're actually exposed here on A, B, C, D, and E levels. And they have no idea. But they never tried to take the time to say, look, define these terms, perhaps, because defining terms can save a lot of ambiguity. People don't even do that. Where now certain terms in your NDA are open to multiple meanings, and now when you try to enforce that, they're going to say, well, no, we think it means this. And in contract law, the most basic principle is any ambiguity is construed against the drafter, which means if you are the one who's claiming you drafted and you present it, if you don't put the proper terms or define or make the contract say what it's supposed to say, you will lose because you didn't properly draft what it should mean.
Yeah, that's your liability there.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to make sure you tailor it to the situation. So NDAs protect a lot of those facets of your business. And again, it's the ideas, the principles. And a lot of times if you have certain types of intellectual property that might be patented or trademarked or copyrighted, you want to make sure that people are aware of that and they're on notice that they can't use that. Obviously to the detriment of your business. And obviously they're going to be on notice of it through public filings, but a lot of times people won't know that. And so you'll save yourself litigation time and lawyer expenses by putting everything that needs to be in the NDA, put it out there, and then you're covered.
Do you see a lot of people where they more so use these forms, and they're meant to protect yourself, protect your company, to build that separation between personal and business in terms of assets. Mm-hmm. But do you see that people just have these forms just to have them, just because they're like, I was told this is what I need, so I went and grabbed a free form?
Sure.
But any half-skilled lawyer can poke holes in some. I mean, I've pulled some of these up online. Mm-hmm. I have to believe any half-skilled lawyer can just poke holes in these left and right and make them completely void.
Absolutely.
So it just, to me, I'm just thinking it's almost stresses me out thinking of the small business owner trying to do everything right, trying to cover their bases. Sure. Oh, I need this form. All right, I'm going to have this meeting. I want this person to sign this NDA so no information gets out. Well, information gets out. Now you're spending the money to go try and sue, or you're spending the money to go try and recoup some claims here.
Because guess what? You just hit on the principle that all businesses don't think about is they think legal fees are too expensive. And they say, why would I spend money on having a lawyer look at this when I can perhaps find one online, or you hope it's good? Yeah. Whereas if you paid a little bit up front, it's going to cost you less than if you have to go to litigation over something and pay $10,000 to $20,000 retainer when, I could have paid $350 and had them look at this for an hour and fix it up and I'm done.
Exactly. And the same principle applies with, we're talking about an accountant or accounting. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay a little bit of money with, some of their time up front, but they're going to set you up properly so that, you don't end up in a tornado of problems later on. And I feel, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, having the kind of overall picture, and that snowball maybe being a little bit bigger than it really is.
Right.
Having a little bit of extra money front end to set these things up properly will save you so much money in the long run. And honestly, it'll probably keep you and prevent failure from happening.
Correct.
Truthfully, because I feel like a lot of companies really get in over their head when it's time to report your numbers and do your annual filings and do your taxes. When a legal problem does come up and you realize, man, I've had this business for 5 years. This is the first time that anything like this has come up. I'm not used to this, but you're not even covered or protected for anything.
Right. Or you haven't even.
It's just been a waste. Everything you've been doing is a waste of time. Like that's heartbreaking in itself. So I'm
with you.
I hope that can be kind of like a moral to everybody listening. It's just that go and do these things on the front end. Don't do it when and
it's those little things, the small little things where, if you just, had someone look at it and they added 3 sentences, you would have been fine. And it's like, why didn't I do that? And to me, that's just common sense. But sometimes, people don't think that way. They have so much going on in their life or in their business and they're worried about expenses. But again, you have to think, as any business should, long term. And am I protected long term? Every time I put this document out there, what risk am I comfortable with? I mean, I ask all my clients that, because obviously anything can be litigated. You have the most perfect contract in the world, and you can find an argument with it. Doesn't mean that person's going to win. They're going to try to bring something up. But so you have to make sure you understand what your risk tolerance is. And some companies will say, look, I'll grab this random thing online, have no lawyer look at it, and I'm fine with it. But we'll go and do that. But, at the end of the day, is that really the best, move for your business?
Yeah, and I think when you come up against people in the business world who are, and there's a ton out there who are really savvy, and when they come up against these documents and they actually read them, they don't just, I'll sign this NDA because we're having this meeting. There's sensitive information, and they don't want me to, form against them and start a business competing with them. There are people that will read these things and be like, "Oh, this is a crock of shit. I'll go do this. Like, this is a great idea. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna do it."
I got one.
And I have the funds to do it.
With that?
Yeah, we got one. Like, this is just a boilerplate.
Yeah, Lagos, look at this for me, Steve. I take a look and I'm like, you can sign this because they're not actually asking you to protect the company.
It didn't say anything. And, and that kind of goes back to something we were talking about a couple minutes ago. Is like your contracts. So if you're like I am, or we have a company services agreement, which is, people need to sign. It's only as good as it is tight. So if it's on.
And I want to stop you there real quick. Tight by meaning defining terms.
Well, it's part of it. Tight mean across the board. Like, are you very specific? Is there not a lot of wiggle room for these other clients to basically come back against you and wiggle their way out of, paying you or owing you anything, or trying to claim the rights to something that you created, for instance, if we're talking about, Law's company. So tight as in, look, any argument they could make, you have something there for it.
Yeah.
So I don't think I owe you this. Yes, you selected these terms, you initialed, you agreed. Or I don't like those payment arrangements. No, everything's covered there. They could say, you never put the proper payment terms in. Yes, it says net 15, you owe it. You can't get around this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, you owe more than this because every late payment within 7 days, you owe whatever % interest. Like, everything's covered, where basically any rebuttal you want to make, it's tight because everything's there.
It's on paper. You already agreed to it, whether you realize it or not.
It means foresight. Tight means foresight. Everything you think that could happen, you've contemplated it.
And I want to lay that out because I think there are a lot of people that would listen and they would say, "Oh, okay, I need my NDA to be tight," and they're just sitting there and they're like, "Yeah, but what does that entail?" So just want to kind of throw that out there so people can get a better understanding.
But I also want to leave like general. That was something I learned in my business law class, and that's one of the few things that stuck in my head, which is just a good rule of thumb when you're. I try to think of stuff like while I'm on the fly, I can do a quote in my head if I have to. I get pretty close to how we would quote a client. So that's one thing. Like, rule of thumb wise, I have starting points. When I think of all legal documents, they are only as good as they are tight, basically. That also spawns off to, subsets of time frame, payment schedule, services that will be administered for the client, that kind of stuff. There's all these exhibits. Steve went through it, and it's like, holy shit, this thing is. People get like a hand cramp thinking about looking at it. So, but that's how it has to be. I mean, it's not. He's very diligent in that way. Where, hey, you think of every scenario, so you're not left vulnerable. And that's why you go to FantettiLegal.com. Your business will be fine.
That's right.
That's the way I try to think. But I'll tell you this. And we talked about that. I think Law posted on his sites a couple of weeks ago, and we did this, or we talked about it, where sometimes obviously you want to make your contracts as tight as possible, but it's also good, and I'm saying this because you guys touch on this a lot because you worry about reaching out to young entrepreneurs, young businesses.
Yeah,
is sometimes in the early phase of your business, because you haven't done business before and you're new, you will learn lessons as you go through and start doing business. Oh, you know what? I never thought this situation could arise. Now I need to put this in my contract. So sometimes you will also learn as you go through. And that's why it's important to audit your contracts perhaps every quarter or every 6 months and at least once a year. As things come up when you do business and you learn, you could say, I never thought this would happen. Or I opened up my business to a whole different phase than what I thought it would when I started doing business with this random client. And now I have to start accounting for this. Well, now you have to make sure you talk to your lawyer and put it back in your contract, or just get in your contract somehow, not just keep going on and not learn from it. So that's another point.
So we've started initiating stuff at the Toco Works office where once a quarter, Steve and I'll meet up and we're going to go over any contracts. I keep an Evernote note of things like, hey, are we protected against this? Most of the stuff I had as a note, we already had because Steve's really good. But but I was like, I just want to make sure this never happens again. Now, former me, let's go 10 years before, let's go 21-year-old law. Like this was, I'd be like, fuck it. I'll do that later. And then never, ever do it.
Right.
And so now it's a thing where it's like, don't do that style ever again. And what's the Mark Cuban quote? Like entrepreneurs need to, they need to act like there's always someone gunning for their business.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is one of those things where if people are gunning for you, your competition's gunning for you, this is where you could get exposed pretty easily.
But this is also how you can, and I don't mean, this is in a very smaller setting or a smaller market, how you can help control competition in a way. Is by having your stuff locked down tight that will, I feel like if someone's out there and there's people that are out there and they're just looking for businesses to start. I mean, that's kind of, I feel like where the landscape is right now. People are out there actively trying to find niches, trying to find something that they think can be profitable, and they're just going to go and do it. They build it, they sell it, and they move on to the next thing. So that could be your industry. That could be your area very easily. So in order to help protect that competition from coming about, I feel like this would be the best way to do it.
This is the first way you should be starting, and this will save you a large percentage of your problems. Yes.
So kind of playing off that, something that I've been thinking about for my own small business. But when is the best time, or when is it necessary to make the investment in trademarking, copywriting, those sort of things? When do you find that companies need it? It's necessary, because that part can be a little more expensive than some of the other stuff.
It can be.
But what are your thoughts on trademarking, and maybe when somebody should go those routes?
Like, you mean the whole thing, trademark, copyright,
exactly,
patent, that kind of area. So anything intellectual property. Well, I'll tell you this. I know you know the common sense answer, so I want you to tell me.
Well, it would be at the beginning.
Right away.
Yeah.
And here's why. It's a basic answer, but people ignore it. That area of law is focused on who got there first.
Right.
It is. If you filed first, even if it wasn't accepted first.
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, two people are trying to file for the same patent. And for those of you who don't know, a patent is you patent ideas based on, basically, for instance, to keep it, dumbed down, basically is, how things will work, or you have a procedure or a process, basically, for invention. That's what patents are for.
Right.
Okay. So let's say three people are trying to file for the same one. Well, it comes down to who filed first. The first one that comes in gets priority over everyone else. So if it gets accepted because it was filed first, the other ones coming through might meet the proper criteria, but if they didn't meet the priority process, they're gone. Yeah. So it's important to go first. So there's the first answer. Now, same thing with trademark or copyrights. Trademark is for identifying marks, like, the Coca-Cola symbol or the Starbucks symbol. Those are things that get trademarked. Yeah. Also sayings, like, you got the right one, baby, for Pepsi, or whatever it was back in the 90s. I don't know why that one came to my head. Yeah, I know. So anyway, I read a lot of old cases, okay?
You guys remember Crystal Clear Pepsi, right?
Right. So, wow, that was random. Anyway, and also with that,
someone out there's like, I like this guy. I know what he's talking about. I get it.
I have to keep some comic relief here. But and then obviously for copyrights, it can be literary works. Books, it can be for poems, it can be for even procedures like how to serve a tennis ball. I mean, it could be something like that. Those things get copyrighted. So, you obviously have to file first, and you have to make sure of the second point besides filing first is you have to do a lot of searches. So before you can even file, and usually people hire lawyers for this because it can take a lot of time. You can do them on yourself. You can go on the international databases. You can go on the U.S. Patent Trademark Association. You can go and check, and you can see what's there, and you can look at them. But they have to be differentiated. So then you have to worry about not only timing, is you have to worry about making sure that yours is so unique that it can't be affiliated with somebody else's.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Is there a certain, I don't know how they judge this or calculate this, is there a certain percentage of differentiation? Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right?
I know.
Okay.
I know what you're saying.
Is there a certain percentage that they have to be different from someone else's? Your patent from someone else's?
Yeah. It's going to depend on how many are already in that area.
Okay.
So if you're filing for, let's say, a patent on how to keep a tire on a car, well, you're going to bet that's pretty much a really highly covered area. Yeah. So you're going to have to be like almost 100% different than everybody else's because there's so many already ideas out there. That's something that's lasted for so long. Good luck.
Right.
But if you're trying to do something that hasn't even been thought of yet, then you're going to have a really good shot that no one's out there, which means when they go and do your check, there's multiple layers of checks, copyright, trademarks, patents especially, where layers meaning you have to look through, round 1 of searches, round 2, because tons are out there in that same realm.
Yeah.
And then they're going to look at the differentiation and identification factors, where how similar are they, how different are they, and is that same idea already out there, where if we allow this through, is it going to be construed to be almost the same way as the 20 other ones that are right ahead of it?
Yeah.
So if that happens, you pretty much won't be able to. And what people don't realize too with this process, and why you want to do it right away, is it's very rare that when you file it once, it just goes straight through like gravy and you don't hear from the offices, patent, trademark, whatever.
Right.
Because they're going to kick it back and say, nope, this is too much like this. Further explain why it's different. You go again, nope, kicks back again, nope, further explain why this is different. And so the longer that takes, you're missing out on that timing period. So you have to get that stuff in early. And people will wait and say, no, we'll be fine, we can do it later. The longer you wait, you lose priority and you lose the battle of trying to go through and get your refiles done. And by the time it's accepted, sometimes it can take, depending on what it is, but really complicated patents and things like that can take a year, sometimes even longer.
Yeah. Okay, so if I have my brilliant idea called To Go Says, Mimosas on the Go. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
All right.
This has already been covered. People don't copy it. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
No, I'm going to open source it. So I'll be the Elon Musk of drinking. But
Someone's
basically,
copywriting this right now.
it's an idea we had 5 years ago. There's in Tampa Bay, had a startup weekend 2 weekends ago, and it was a beverage edition. I was like, got it. I would have nailed this. But the rules were different.
They're like, does anyone have anything to say? Well, I was like, yep.
Well, I do have.
As a matter of fact,
I have a whole notebook full
got
of
billboards behind them.
ideas like this. Well, it's weird.
Handouts.
It's like being a comedian. Like, you have to have this weird sense of ego that this is such a weird idea. But it also, after watching Shark Tank so much, it's like, well, you go, well, you could be a little crazy, and you have to be crazy to kind of get you to that level of like, I have an idea, I want to take it to, I want this to be a business.
You got to make people care. That's the selling point.
Yeah.
Why does it matter to them?
So
people forget that.
Drunks want brunch on the go, and so here's well, if Copa, the plastic wine glass that you can get at gas stations, why not To Go Says? And so here's the design. You'd have you can't have it mixed already because it won't work.
No, it won't.
It'll deteriorate too fast, or it'll expire too fast. So you have orange juice at the bottom. The design you would have to patent. So the design would be, you kind of rip open the cap that has champagne in it.
Drops it in.
Bubbles are fresh.
Bam.
Dude, champagne goes down, bubbles go up.
That's right.
Exactly.
To Go Says.
So To Go Says. So
there's your tagline.
So let's go through the IP part of this.
Okay.
I'd have to get a patent on the design if it's unique, right?
Yes, for a device, yes.
For the device.
Yes.
You'd want to.
Yes. If even if there's a method involved in terms of mixing, you can copyright that.
Right.
Yeah,
so
but
now
that's
you're on a different realm.
But now you can get paid on that patent.
Right. You can license that out.
That's another.
Of course you can.
That's another avenue of revenue.
How do you think all these big companies make it through franchises? When like McDonald's franchises and they have all their methods and they're giving you the intellectual property rights to use the big golden arches or how we cook our fries. I mean, all that stuff's copyrighted, trademarked, patented.
So
they're gonna make money. You have to buy all that. That's why franchises cost $1 million to get a McDonald's.
Yeah.
So patent on,
you're paying for that.
The patent's on the design. The copyright would be on the name.
You could trademark the name,
trademark the name,
what you're trying to do, or you could also copyright the process.
So I want to go through like what an example would be, just to kind of contextualize it for people that this can get in the weeds again. This is a tough thing. This is why you need to talk to an attorney about your IP, your intellectual property. I shouldn't shorten it.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to patent the design. I'm going to trademark the name To Go Says.
Sure.
It's probably spell it with a Z.
Whatever you want to do.
Because white trash people love Z's. Well, I know my target audience, guys. And so it's the guys that drink Monsters.
No comment on this.
You can't comment, but I will. And so it's going to be it's going to be in the impulse aisle right next to the lottery tickets.
Nice.
And so
the lottery ticket machine where you don't even have to interact with somebody.
Exactly. And so
this is too good.
So To Go Says, and then we copyright maybe the taglines, Mimosas on the Go or something like that. We can do better than that. But you can
trademark that. Yeah.
Trademark a tagline.
Yes.
Copyright. What's the difference?
Process. So trademark is like, you don't copyright like a picture. like on your business card.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a trade. If you want to get that protected, that's trademark protected.
Okay.
Right. And then copyright is the actual materials, like the language that's used, right? Or the process for mixing a drink.
Okay.
Those like the process or the language involved in your process, or the writings in the book, because that's all a process in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff's copyrighted. So like I said, even the way to serve a tennis ball, every step, front foot forward or right foot back, arch your shoulders this way, you come through. I mean, if you create a certain special way to serve, then you could file a copyright on that exact process. So those kinds of things get copyrighted.
Okay.
And then patents are, like I said, the invention type realm where you have
to put out the design plans.
Everything's got to be out there.
But technically, you could patent a way to serve as well. No?
You could arguably. I mean,
Right.
it's more device driven. So is there a device? Like if you have a shoulder device to serve, then you would patent the device.
Okay, gotcha.
But the concept is not patentable.
Okay.
It's, like the range.
That's good. I'm glad we cleared that up, because that's
okay.
something that I
That's
would
copyrightable.
think, man,
Well,
I'm
listen,
going to
there's
patent the way people do this, but if there's no device, if there's nothing else used to doing it, it's just your own body.
Now listen, that's in general. Now let me
Right.
tell you this. There's litigation and there's arguments that sometimes
You got to be tight.
people think
Mhm.
something copyrighted should actually be patentable or vice versa. So I'm not going to say 100%.
So should you do
Because there's
both?
arguments made. Again, that's up to you. And let me say this, I haven't said this yet. If you want to patent something, you can't just go to any attorney. You have to get an attorney who's
You have
passed
to go
the
to
patent
Fantetti
bar.
Legal.
No, I
Oh.
don't have a patent bar. You have to have a patent, which means those lawyers have had to have either engineering background or a medical
Oh, wow.
biology background. That's it. Like, you have to have studied that in college and have a degree in it, and you've actually had to have passed. There's a separate bar, a patent bar. So I never wanted to do patent law, so I don't do patents, but I do copyrights. But to do those, you have to make sure you go to the proper attorney. But again, there's an argument that comes up all the time: is should this be patentable or should this be copyrighted? And sometimes it can be juggled in both, and you can try to file both and see what gets accepted
Yeah.
and what gets rejected. So that's one idea that sometimes, if you're not sure, attorneys will tell their clients, "Look, let's try for both and see what happens."
Well, and if
as
you
long as you get accepted,
both,
you're good.
and
Well,
if you get both, you're even covered. You're covered even
you're
more.
golden.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, we're hitting up on that hour mark. Anything you want to bring up? Your law firm's pivoting.
Doing great.
Yeah, doing really well.
What's something you get asked? What's something that you get very often that you're like, man, if I could just put this on a podcast real quick.
What's your workout routine, bro?
Yeah, people ask me that too. No, clients don't ask me that. Basically, a couple different things. One, they ask you, how much your services are, which it can vary depending on what's going on. But
Yeah.
I'll focus more on that, more on how to help the client is in terms of they'll say, what's the best plan for me? What should I be doing from day one for my business? Because a lot of times they get you too late. Where you should have had X, Y, and Z already, and it's been a year and a half. And so from day one, what should I be doing? And I'll let them know, and we talked about a lot of the stuff on this podcast and what you have to obviously do. And then they'll ask me a lot of times, from a contractual standpoint, is what's the best thing I can do to avoid litigation? And there's no right answer to that, because like I said,
you don't know where it's going to come from.
You can find anything you want, show it to me right now in front of me, and I'll find something wrong. I can go to court.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? And whether you'll win or not, that's a whole different story. But at least to put you in that realm, you have a whole different problem. You got a lawyer up.
Yeah.
You're going to be in court. It can tie up. You go through discovery. And when you do that, obviously things get out in the open and are public now. And they become public record when you file with the court. So that's another reason why you want to avoid those things too.
Yeah.
So they ask you that. And again, with a contract, the best thing I can tell you is you have to go to an attorney, because they will have the foresight to know, look, here's the issues that can arise from a legal risk and liability perspective that a regular person probably wouldn't think of. But it's important to have that dialogue with their attorney, that relationship where you talk and engage back and forth, because the attorney can learn more about the risks and liabilities associated with your business as you explain your business to the attorney. So a lot of times, and the reason why I get a business a lot from different businesses is because sometimes they'll go to even bigger law firms and they'll just basically want to get the check and do the work for them, and then that's it. And there's no counsel involved.
Right.
So I highly recommend not to be shy. You're paying your attorneys not just for the work, but to get the counsel aspect of it.
And it sounds like what you focus on is helping them to better. You don't just do it. They tell you what they want, and then you drop off their documents, and it's like, here you go, you're protected. It's more of a learning experience, so that they have the knowledge as well.
Exactly. And sometimes people don't even want to hear it from you. They don't have the time, or they just don't think it's important. And listen, I'll say that's fine, but I will always put out there. I mean, ask law.
Yeah.
Me and law draw diagrams on this thing so I can explain every aspect to them all the time on the
I've seen
whiteboard. Yeah. So
people come in and like, you guys doing calculus?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is legal
This is
stuff.
legals, yeah, but like sometimes you have to cater to the client and help them know that. So that's something I always try to let them know and make sure that they understand that there's more to this, not just the relationship with your attorney. It's you have to serve the client. Every attorney should always be aiming to that, and that's what Fantetti Legal always tries to make sure that they do in offering competent legal services. But I mean, that's what should be expected, I think, from all clients.
Yeah, well, it is definitely nice, talking with Steve, and hopefully people listening at home feel the same way, that he's someone who can articulate his points really well and help teach you, rather than just say, no, this is what you need to do, and they're just already, drawing up documents and you don't learn.
Yeah,
it's nice to have that teacher aspect of it.
Our businesses are similar in the sense that we want to be good communicators of something that's really difficult to understand. The nerd world's really difficult for a lot of people to grasp because it's coming at you so quickly and it's exponentially changing. And so same with, look at it this way, the legal, there's more attorneys than ever, it feels like, or at least there's more necessity to have a lawyer when you have a business. So it's one of those things where you have to have a good communicator.
Yeah.
I've talked to attorneys that can't explain it in dumb terms for me. Like, hey, distill this down like it's a college football game and I'll figure this out.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't do that, whereas Steve can. So that's a big thing when you're looking for an attorney. Are they explaining this to you in a way that you're actually understanding it? Because sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I got it, and so you'll be like, you don't look like you have it. And I'll be like, yeah, I don't.
The look on your face is telling me otherwise.
I try to skip by on that one.
I caught him though. I appreciate you saying that though.
Yeah, but I mean that's a big thing that's really hard to describe. What can you differentiate yourself as a law firm, a business law firm versus another one? And I think communication, that's what I look at for our company, is like, communication's ultimately going to be one of our biggest assets, because nerds get really frustrated trying to explain how the nerd world works. And so
I get frustrated like that, right? You try
to
teach me something.
we tried to do a few things the other day, business efficiency.
I got to be more patient.
Yeah, well, look, that's why our company will exist.
That's
and
right.
So so I guess the best thing to do is, if people have questions or anything, the other part is Steve will email you back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give it any time frame. I'm not going to say within 48 hours.
We'll put his cell phone number in the show notes. That way you can just text him directly.
He really won't
he would
care.
love that.
I am not on Tinder though.
So fantettilegal.com. I think that's a good stopping point right now. Sweat Equity Podcast. Subscribe, rate, review. That's the cheat code that gets us up. You'll hear Steve Confetti Fantetti, his voice on the Triple Option Podcast.
Can't wait.
I'm sure come in August-ish. We'll probably start that.
Yes.
And former, we didn't mention this, former college football player as well.
Yes.
We mentioned on the first episode that people listen to.
Yeah, if you want to go back to the first episode about how to be an attorney, how to get through law school, that's what we kind of covered that first time around. This one, we thought it'd be cool to have you back on to be able to answer some of the questions that frankly come up just all the time, and it's like I can't answer some of these things. So
and I think it should be noted, we're going to put it on Steve's schedule for him, that he'll be coming up on our panel when we do our live discussions on Facebook. Thanks, Steve, for volunteering to do that. That's awesome.
Appreciate you getting
He's a great guy.
in that already. Yeah.
That's Caleb deserves some coffee for that booking.
Right.
All right.
That's right.
What? Anything to leave on?
Last thing I want to say is this. I want to say, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah.
And that this today was the true definition of sweat equity, getting up on Memorial Day on a holiday at 7 in the morning, 7:30 it was, to come and do work. So I want to tell you guys are the true definition of sweat equity.
Yeah,
Nicely
I like
done.
it. Wow. You couldn't end it in a better way. Peace.